today, let's also speak to two ambassadors who will be joining us shortly. This is Nicolas Nihon, he's the ambassador of the Kingdom of Belgium, and Fionnuala Quinlan, who's the ambassador of Ireland. We want to hear what these two countries have been doing. Let's first of all actually go straight into the line and speak to the ambassador of the Kingdom of Belgium, His Excellency Nicolas Nihon. Good morning.
Good morning. Very happy, very delighted to be today with you.
We're also very happy and excited that you could join us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yes. Good morning, Ambassador.
So Good morning. Good morning.
Ambassador, in the situation room this morning is Dr. Mercy Korir and Nduoko, and my name is Eric Latif. And we basically want to understand what the Kingdom of Belgium has been doing, in terms of supporting us as a country, and also looking at how Belgium, first of all, is dealing with COVID-19. I think let's just start off from there in terms of the numbers and the kind of measures that the Kingdom of Belgium has instituted to manage COVID-19. What's happening in Belgium?
Well, actually, as you know, we've been pretty much hit by the virus. We have something like 7,000 people who died, actually,
yep.
And many more who are infected. We were not on the front line like Italy, and that gave us time a bit more to organize. We did a complete lockdown, and people had to stay at home, and it lasted for almost 2 months. And now we actually in the phase where, from the 4th of May, we are, restarting a bit the activities, allowing some companies to reopen, allowing people to leave more frequently their houses, meeting a few number of people, very close acquaintances, and we're going to reopen the school soon. And as you might imagine, it's a bit in this kind of game, a bit of try and error. Kind of situation where you are acting with very much caution, but if you go too fast, you might, face the consequences.
Yeah.
And for that, I would like to say, whatever the government does, there will be people criticizing.
Of course.
Because if you don't do it, you're blamed. If you do it, you're blamed also. So I really hope that this reopening and restarting of the economy is going to work for us, but it's going to also depend on the virus and how it has spread and how it might strike again, if hopefully not.
So, Your Excellency, so you're saying that before the 4th of May, there was like a total lockdown?
There was a total lockdown. People were supposed to stay at home, but of course they were allowed to go to supermarkets and to some shops in their neighborhood, to do some shoppings. That's what. But people were supposed to restrict very much their little travels. Inside the country, and the police was also there, to check what people were doing on the road, making sure they're not going to see their friends 50 kilometers away. So it was psychologically, like in any countries of Europe.
Yeah.
A difficult situation for the families. Kids had to stay at home.
Yeah.
Parents had to school. Their children at home. So quite a difficult situation. But we still have, economically speaking, also the possibility also to buffer a bit that people did a lot of teleworking, which helped tremendously. But there are of course some things which obviously cannot be made from home.
Joining us on the line as well, Ambassador Nicolas, is your colleague from the Republic of Ireland. This is Ms. Fionnuala Quinlan. Good morning, Your Excellency.
Good morning. How are you?
We're very well, thank you. Thank you very much for joining us and agreeing to speak to us.
Good morning.
My pleasure.
So I'm just going to throw that question that we had thrown to Nicolas just before you joined us. The situation in terms of the war against COVID-19 in Ireland.
Sure, and thank you for the opportunity to come on. So Ireland currently has around 22,000 cases of COVID. Maybe just to give your readers a little bit of context, our population is around 5 million, so something around the population of Nairobi, I suppose.
Yeah.
We've had about 1,350 deaths. But our government reacted very, very quickly, actually, as soon as the first cases of COVID started really to become apparent. They instituted quite a strict lockdown. So something like, I think what I caught the end of what Nicolas was saying, schools closed, many businesses closed, people working from home and so forth. Only really essential workers out and about. And actually, currently, or rather, up until just very recently, people could only travel within 2 kilometres of their home.
Yeah.
And the over 70s, of course, who we know are particularly vulnerable to this virus, were actually mandated to stay at home, and people were asked to support them through, doing their shopping and so forth. So now the government has set out a very clear and slow, I suppose, exit from the virus. So starting from the 18th of May, we'll have a 5-step exit from the virus that will bring us up to August, which is when, I suppose it is hoped at least things will be as back to normal as they can be in terms of, bigger gatherings, pubs opening and so forth. But between now and then, it's a very gradual and slow easing of the restrictions. And the government has warned that at any point, obviously, they'll be monitoring the number of cases, the amount of testing and so forth. And at any point, if we see the virus resurging, they'll go back to stricter measures again. So that's where we are.
What is this 5-step exit strategy that you're talking about? It would be interesting to know, maybe a good learning point for the rest of us.
Okay, well, very quickly. So let's say from the 18th of May, some shops can open, but only. So, for example, shops selling IT equipment and outdoor shops, so garden centres, hardware stores. Outdoor meetings will be allowed, but only up to 4 people. And outdoor work, such as construction, can resume. So basically, very small gatherings and work and so forth that takes place outside.
Okay.
Then the second phase is the 8th of June, and that will allow smaller retail stores to open once they can put in the kind of physical distancing measures that we need, and libraries. And then 3 weeks later, we'll have cafes and restaurants allowed to reopen, but again with very strict physical distancing measures in place. Playgrounds will be allowed to reopen, which I'm sure parents will be particularly delighted with. And non-essential retail, so for example clothes shops and so forth, will be allowed to reopen.
Okay.
And then assuming all goes well, we'll move to the 4th phase on the 20th of July, where people will actually be allowed to move beyond the 20-kilometre radius. They'll allow small gatherings, including weddings and baptisms, but limited to family and close friends. And then those who haven't been able to go to work can return to work. And then finally, the last phase is August the 10th. And then, larger social gatherings will be allowed, still with restrictions, of course. I mean, I think we're going to be facing restrictions for some time everywhere in the world. And then on a phased basis, from that point on, from August on, schools and universities can reopen.
I love that plan. It sounds so elaborate, and it's clear to everybody. This is what we expect at a certain time.
Yeah, and I think that's very important. People have really been very good about complying with the restrictions, but of course they take a huge toll on people. So I think the idea now that the light is at the end of the tunnel, we can see a hope in the future. It has been very, very helpful to people and really raised the mood on the island of Ireland.
Is it what informs the timelines or the time duration? Because you're very specific even on the dates, like 18th May, 8th June. Is there anything that has informed that time duration for each of the 5 phases?
Well, I think the thinking behind it is that there's 3 weeks between each step, which gives you adequate time to assess the impact of the change. So in that 3 weeks, obviously, they'll be very closely monitoring, the number of new cases, the number of admissions to intensive care, how many tests are being carried out. And if they see a spike then in transmission, that will be a trigger to maybe draw back in.
Right. So then it gives you enough time to make an added decision if you see that something is not going right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. If I can go to you, Ambassador Nihon, if we look at Belgium's involvement in previous pandemics, such as HIV/AIDS and Ebola, also in West and Central Africa, we've been quite involved from a pharmaceutical research point of view. With the current pandemic, do you see that there would be some involvement from Belgium, or are there things going on in the background that we may not be privy to at this point?
You might be aware that in Antwerp we have the Institute of Tropical Medicine.
Yes.
The ITM. I just want, well, as you know, scientists sometimes they work, in the shadow and in silence. They need time and silence to work. And they've been actually working on a study to understand the transmission dynamics of this virus in different contexts and countries. And more specifically and more concretely, they're also busy doing a study on, and pardon me if I don't pronounce it correctly, this hydroxychloroquine or chloroquine, which is the normal area treatment, and to see if this treatment would be adequate not only for COVID outpatients, but also to see if that would be the right drug to mitigate the effect on the health workers, the health professionals, which are the most exposed, and which has to avoid getting the virus or to heal pretty quickly. And that's one thing. And the second thing is, of course, is the pharmaceutical, I would say, whole industry in Belgium, which is a very important chunk of our economy. And as you know, they're pulling their forces with different with also different other companies of the world. I would like to mention, RIT, which is Research and Industry Therapeuticals, which is now part of the group GlaxoSmithKline. And this is, a real, it's this unit in Belgium is producing 2.5 million vaccines a day for all kinds of illnesses. In the world, and it's for sure that this company will be involved soon. It's kind of a race for time, and many companies in the world, in the U.S., in Europe, are trying to find something. The best is that they can pull their forces, and you might be aware that recently the UN organized some sort of a pledging conference. Where the European Union, but other member states of the European Union, also the UK and also China and some others, pledged to give some money, so that we can pull our force together to find a cure to that virus.
Coming back now into the effects of COVID-19 and what we are likely to see, one of course of the first industries to be hard hit was the travel industry, the airline industry. Airlines across the globe have parked their planes, and we are seeing, like in South Africa, the South African Airlines, the South African Airways has gone bust. There are many other airlines that are going to be affected. In your own country, one of your airlines, the national airline Sabina, went bankrupt in 2001, and then this ended up being replaced by the current Brussels Airlines. How exactly was this done? And looking, for example, with our own example of Kenya Airways, which is currently struggling even before the pandemic, and the Kenya Airways management is already looking at how they're going to try and recover out of this pandemic. What would you advise? I mean, what is it that happened with Brussels and Sabina that could be borrowed by Kenya Airways?
Let me first think that, though it's been like 19 years ago, the crash, if I might say so, of Sabina was really a trauma to the Belgians, because many families and for many generations, people work for that company that actually was created in 1923. You can imagine that. So I hope nothing like this can happen to Kenya Airways. Well, the company was bankrupt. you still had all the pilots. You still had the technical expertise to maintain the planes of Sabina, but also of many other airways. And there was a sense, and that's very important among our political masters. The sense of urgency to maintain a connection between Brussels, which is the capital of Belgium, but also the capital of the EU, and other European capitals, if not other capitals of the world.
Yeah.
So what did the government did? He said, this time I don't want a company which is 100% owned by the state, which was the case of Sabina.
Yeah.
And actually, this company was not making much profit. It was not commercially. A lot of money of the state was put into that into that company. So they said, we want a private company, and they encouraged 40 investors to come together and to create SN Brussels in 2002. And this company said, now we're not going to go to Tokyo, we're not going to go to Washington. We're going to center our business first on Europe and a bit on the Great Lakes of Africa, where the market was always good for Sabina. Then it merged in 2006 with Virgin Express, which was a low-cost company. So this Brussels Airlines, became a bit like with a normal side and a low-cost side to it. And it became successful, and then Lufthansa, the big German group, then decided to take some shares in it, and now it's 100% owned by Lufthansa.
Yeah.
So if we make a parallel with Kenya, the questions to ask yourself is, why would you entertain, an airway? Why do you need KQ? And the obvious reason is that you don't want to depend on other countries.
Yeah.
For your citizens to travel, for your government officials to travel, for the tourists you want to attract. You don't want to have indirect connections. So, and also because you're a hub, economically. You don't want to be isolated. But the big questions after that is at what cost? And for the Belgian politicians, they say, it doesn't make sense to have a huge company in Europe, which is a very crowded field, and we don't want to use too much taxpayers' money.
Yeah.
So I think it's a call for the Kenyan government to say, how much money am I able to put in it, and to make sure that this money is efficient, and it's not just going for perks for pilots and the crews and the whole administration of the company, because actually working for Sabina was a very, very good, was a very good job. But actually people were very, very highly paid, and it was just not sustainable.
It was just draining the rest of the economy.
Exactly.
Okay. My question, I think, will go to the both of you. We are, as a globe, we are looking at a treatment or a vaccine for the COVID-19, for the coronavirus. And where we are, we would be at a disadvantage being a resource-limited society or resource-limited country, as opposed to Ireland and Belgium. Where do you see Kenya or Kenyan scientists, the Kenyan population, playing a role in being a part of, the global effort to get a solution and a permanent solution to the current crisis?
Well, Fionnuala, you can have a first shot.
Thank you, Nicolas.
It's tricky.
Well, I think the search for a virus is really a global one, and the work is going on all over the world, and we keep seeing articles and reports around scientists in Israel or England or the US or whatever, really pressing ahead with this important work. I did read during the week actually that there will be some of the drugs that are likely to treat coronavirus will be trialed in Kenya along with other areas of the world. Obviously there is work going on here as well on that, but I think the whole world is working very hard on that. And actually just this week our Prime Minister announced we were contributing 18 million euros, so around $20 million to Gavi, which is the Global Vaccine Alliance. And their work is to procure and distribute vaccines once they're developed. So we're focusing our efforts. I mean, Irish scientists, of course, in various labs around the world are working on this really important work. But we're focusing on kind of putting money into, I guess, the global architecture to try to ensure that a vaccine, when it comes, will be safe, of course, in the first instance, but accessible to countries that, you know, as you said, are more resource limited.
Nicolas?
My answer to that, my answer to that would say, of course, countries are different, and we are at different stages of development. We know, of course, there are also very good scientists in Kenya, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, I read somewhere that they were, pulling together, to work on certain things. I'm not sure what it was. I think what the crisis showed is that the health system of Kenya, could be under stress for the moment. But so far, so good. But I think the first thing, Kenya can do is to put, I would say, the whole health organization system and in connection with the counties, to put that in order. I think this is the most important thing that actually can help. The vaccine will come, but we don't know when it will come. The tests, everybody's been, I would say, lacking those tests, which impairs us actually to know how far the virus has spread. The questions of the mask. So I think the best thing for Kenya to do is to keep organizing oneself on the ground with the counties, with the hospitals, and as we've seen also, and with the help of the European Union, also try as fast as possible to produce this basic equipment, like the PPE, like the masks, like the ventilators. And I think that thanks to those efforts, I think the health system of Kenya will emerge much better after the crisis than it was before.
Right, Ambassador Fionnuala.
Make an additional comment there,
Sure.
because we have a business organisation called Business Ireland Kenya, and yesterday we had the CAS for Health, Dr. Mercy Mwangangi, with us over video, explaining to us how the Kenyan government have set themselves up to respond, and it was really very, very impressive. Just the comprehensive number of committees all tasked with dealing with, different issues. But particularly, she spoke about how this crisis is really facilitating, I suppose, innovations in service delivery. So she gave some examples around, for example, prescriptions and, how they're now patients are being given, much longer prescriptions so they don't have to come back, but also the use of technology in healthcare and their partnerships with the private sector to develop innovations. And all of those, I think, will persist long after we've beaten COVID. So in a way, if there's a bright spot to be taken from it, I think it is that COVID is actually driving innovation in the healthcare system that we hope will mean that Kenya emerges stronger from this crisis.
From the crisis. Ambassador Fionnuala, still on that, one of the other areas that we look at hugely is food security, and we know that Ireland is very big on that, and we can see that through a lot of the partnerships, especially with agriculture in this country. Now, looking in times of COVID, we see that food is one of the biggest things that is needed. Would like to know a little bit more about those partnerships that you have with Kenya and what you feel should have been done to at least make steps towards food security in Kenya.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Before COVID, of course, food security was a huge issue in the world as a whole. And we know that 1 in 9 people are hungry, up to a third of our population are undernourished. And that has lifelong consequences, particularly for children. And Ireland has always made hunger actually a real cornerstone of our development programme. And that comes, I think, of our own experience of food insecurity. Ireland suffered a devastating famine in the mid-19th century that killed 1 million people and a million and more emigrated. And you know, that's, even though it's more than 150 years ago, it's still very much with us.
Yeah.
Sure.
So we dedicate more than a fifth of our entire development budget towards tackling hunger. That is, of course, responding to emergencies, but even more importantly, I think, working to prevent these big emergencies. And that is through supporting smallholder farmers, which brings me to our work in Kenya, of course. So in Kenya, I'll just say very briefly, our development program here is focused on 3 areas. The first, as I mentioned, is agriculture. The second is support to the private sector, and then the third is education.
Right.
And we look at all those 3 areas through the prism also of how do we support the climate and, you know, be climate smart in all of our interventions, but also youth and women. But if I come to agriculture in particular, I mentioned to you the famine, of course. Now Ireland is a country that, with a population of 5 million, produces enough food for 35 million.
Right.
So we export around 90% of our dairy in particular, but also our other food to 180 markets around the world. So really, when it comes to Kenya, I suppose what we're trying to do is share the lessons that we've learned on that journey with Kenya. So we work across 3 value chains in Kenya. One is potato, and also dairy, and we're also looking at fisheries, which we have some expertise in. But in terms of potato, we have a 1 million 3-year program focused in Nyandarua that's really looking at how do we increase potato productivity and through that improve livelihoods and, of course, food security. Because the potato is the second most important crop in Kenya, the Irish potato, in fact.
Yes, the Irish one.
So, yeah, and I suppose, I mean, when we looked at the Kenya sector, you see that there's a lot of challenges that we also faced. So that might be around, if it's dairy, it's around kind of low feed and maybe some low technical skills in some parts. With potatoes, the big issue is seeds and having really good seeds. So our potato program is focused on providing improved seeds and training to smallholder farmers, but also supporting the production of high-quality seeds in Kenya rather than importing seeds. So trying to build the indigenous seed industry, obviously, which is of much more benefit to Kenya. Also, we know that up to 40% of yields are lost post-harvest. So we've had a big project to build storage facilities in 5 counties. And we're also, as part of this program, looking at the public-private element. So once smallholder farmers are improving their yields, well, is there somewhere that they can sell them to? So building market linkages, but also looking at possibly supporting a processing plants and so forth. So that it's a really integrated support system that adds value at every point of the chain. Quickly, I'll mention dairy as well, of course. Again, we have a 1 million program over 3 years here that is very much built on our experience of building our dairy sector. The dairy sector in Kenya is really important. We know that 1.8 million smallholder farmers are involved in dairy and that demand is growing. So therefore, this is an area that could really add value to Kenya. So our program here is, as I said, drawing on some of the lessons that we've learned. So it's around using research and development and genetics to essentially determine which breed of animal is best suited to the various areas that we're working in and what type of feed and fodder would most boost their productivity. So our agricultural research and development agency in Ireland, it's called Shagisk, they're working very closely with Calro and bringing that expertise and working very much, of course, in a Kenyan context, in a context that's suited to the conditions here. Again, it's a program that focuses on women and youth and looks very much at being climate smart. So ultimately, we'll have an innovation hub also in Naivasha, where smallholder farmers will get training and extension services, and really, they'll be shown very clearly how to boost their dairy productivity. And finally, the thing I'd mention is we, in Ireland, again, we saw the real importance of cooperatives in terms of allowing farmers, to band together, to buy inputs at a lower price, to sell at a better price. So we're supporting really high potential cooperatives here in Kenya as well, and those that particularly involve women and youth and are engaged in climate smart agriculture, so that, at every point, again, we're just trying to build the value, because because of what we said around the importance of agriculture to food security, we know that up to 85% of people in rural Kenya depend on agriculture for their livelihood. So if you can make an improvement in that, you can really support Kenya and the Kenyan government achieve, the food security element of the Big Four and Vision 2030.
Thank you very much. I want us to take a short break, take a look at traffic, and then continue this conversation. So just stay on the line. On the line with us this morning, Ambassadors Fionnuala Quinlan of Ireland and Ambassador Nicolas Nihon from the Kingdom of Belgium. We know that we are fighting COVID-19, but also it's important to look at Kenya's relation with our international partners and international friends. And that's why we're having a conversation with these two. Good morning. It's 28 minutes to 9 o'clock. Belgium, Nicolas, you'll tell us, is the gateway to Europe. And then Ambassador Fionnuala, you'll tell us how countries, very many of the multinationals that we see operating in Middle East and Africa have their headquarters or hubs in Ireland. So let's start with what does it mean for Belgium, for instance, to be the gateway to Europe?
You can use gateway, you can use crossroads, you can use the word maybe hub. First, I would say when you talk about a hub or a gateway, it's what is given and what you make out of it. The given, the geography, Belgium is a country that is stuck between France, Germany, the Netherlands, and across the channel you have the UK, and with an access to the North Sea, which is actually the busiest sea of the world, in a region which has always been historically densely populated. That's the given. And then this is what we made of it. We built all kinds of railroads, roads. We developed very much the port of Antwerp, which is the second biggest port of Europe, and which in turn became a big chemical hub. And in fact, the more we built, the more we developed, the more we attracted. I think Kenya has always been, I would say, if I make a comparison, a link between the Indian Ocean and the landlocked countries like Uganda, and it has not changed. It has also been at the crossroads of two worlds. I see from on the one hand Sub-Saharan Africa, and then the Gulf, and by extension, the road to Suez, and then to India. And then it's what do you make out of it? And we see that there are roads. There is a train which has recently been modernized, the FGR. You're developing ports in the framework of the LabSet. And you have Kenya Airways, we told it, which is something very important in this infrastructure. You also have a banking sector which is well developed. But as I said, it's not about just proclaiming, I'm the capital or the heart of Europe, as many actually countries could say in Europe. Or it's not just proclaiming for Kenya, I'm the gateway of East Africa, but this is the work you're making, and the way you make yourself, I would say, useful and, if possible, indispensable. And I think this is what we see for the moment. Kenya has a lot of assets. There is also, of course, the competition of some neighbors, but I think Kenya, frankly, has it all to be and to maintain its position.
It has the upper hand. Gateway. But if you were to make comparisons between what you say Belgium has done and what it has done over many years and what Kenya has been doing, would you say that Kenya is following the path that Belgium took?
I mean, it's let's be honest. It's very difficult to compare. Belgium has the size of half of the county of Turkana, right? We have half the size of this. And we have been, as I said, in always a very densely populated region of Europe. So everything is very close, everything is very near, right? But I think you have to have a sense of, I think, what lacks for the moment, I think, in Kenya, but it's not just Kenya, it's in the region, and the EAC, is some sort of a common understanding of who's doing what and who's stronger at doing what, so that when you build a train, when you build a pipeline, when you talk about, moving oil, about harbors on the coast of the Indian Ocean, that you have at least with your neighbors some sort of a good understanding and a deal for the co-financing of these infrastructures.
Yeah.
Otherwise, this competition might be, a big loss of energy and money for many countries of the region. And I think the EAC is actually the place where to discuss these things, and it would be good to see more serious discussion instead of you can see this competition that is maybe not the healthiest, I'd say.
Yeah. Ambassador Fionnuala, what has made Ireland become the hub of all these multinationals operating in the Middle East and Africa?
Well, I suppose the key thing to think about is I suppose the government put a lot of policies in place. I mean, Ireland is a country that doesn't have huge natural resources. I mean, obviously we have fertile land and seas and so forth, but our government really, about 50 to 60 years ago, made a decision to move from being quite protectionist to being really open and globalized. And now, in fact, we're the second most globalized country in the world. We're a small, very open economy. I worked in the US before coming here, and a lot of US companies have invested in Ireland. And very often when I spoke to the leaders of companies that have their headquarters in Ireland, their big operations in Ireland, the number one thing they would say to me is talent. So Ireland is a very young, very educated workforce. We have a big international population. In fact, 1 in 6 people on the island of Ireland weren't born there. So we've a big international population as well. But just a very productive, I think, and dynamic workforce, and educated, of course. And we've a very pro-business environment as well. So, kind of really trying to make it as easy as possible for business to set up in terms of red tape and so forth. We have a very competitive and stable tax rate at 12.5%. And actually, and this brings me to Kenya, I guess, we have a very dynamic and successful agency which has focused on and has become a world leader actually on attracting FDI. And that's the IDA. And basically they offer a full service. So when people come to look at should they invest in Ireland, one thing I should also mention before I move on to the idea is, of course, our membership of the European Union, which gives us barrier-free access to 450 million people. Also, of course, we're English-speaking. But with the IDA, I mean, this is a state agency that if you come to Ireland and you're an investor and you're looking at should I invest here, they will bring you on site visits. They'll organise the legal and recruitment and visa side of things for you. They'll assess property and really give you all of the information and the connections and the assistance that you need. I mean, I've even heard them joke. They'll some of the things they've had to do with for investors, like, yes, we will organise to get your dog to Ireland for you. We can do that. But in short, they set out to do everything possible to bring them here. And actually, as part of our support to Kenya to build and really develop your own very vibrant and innovative private sector. A company that involves former staff from the IDA is now working with Ken Invest, with the support of the embassy, to develop the one-stop centre that will do exactly the things I just spoke about that the IDA does. So, really give you the information or give investors looking at Kenya the information and connections and assistance they'll need. And we've also supported Ken Invest to really build up their technology so that they're communicating and tracking all of the leads and the clients and so forth, as you need to do. So again, I mean, yes, we've the top 5 software companies in Ireland, top 10 global pharma companies in Ireland, and it's really, I think, testament to, the people, the policies, and the quality of life that people can enjoy there. But that's some of that learning, I guess, that we're sharing elsewhere as well.
Okay. Looking at the economies across the globe with the COVID-19 effects, we are likely to suffer serious hits, everyone, all countries. That's one. 2, personal relationships have been strained in the COVID era. And as by extension also, relationship between countries are bound to be strained here and there. How are we going to, rebuild or reorganize ourselves as a globe, different countries, so that we strengthen relationship or we mend the ones that have been broken because of the current COVID pandemic, so that we can now grow our economies from a Belgian perspective, from an Irish perspective?
Well, I can maybe start by saying two things. I think for us Europeans, there is a lesson in this. We saw when the crisis broke out that there was also a tendency to shut down and do things at a national level. But we have the European Union, and I think that it's a lesson. We have to work even more together, jointly. So this is a homework for us inside the European Union. And we've seen that along the weeks, the path to cooperation has been much. We went back to much more cooperation at the very beginning of that crisis that spread fears among the nations. The second thing is a homework for the world, which is multilateralism. This has been many times, put forward also by Kenya and the Kenyan authorities. We want a rule-based world. We want the nations to work together. We have the UN. We have many international organizations. We have the WHO, right? And that some people have been heavily criticizing the WHO.
Yeah.
No, we have to work together, and because those tendencies to unilateralism are, spreading around in the world, and I think this crisis shows that our system of economy is global. We depend on one another. If someone is worse off, it's not because someone is worse off you're going to be better off. No, we're all in this together, and we have just to strengthen these organizations that we have. What would we do without WHO? What would we do without the UN? We would be lost. We have a framework. We have all these agencies. So please, let's work together. And I think here in Kenya we have a very strong partner.
All right. In terms of okay, go ahead. Sorry, Ambassador Fionnuala, go ahead.
No, I was actually just going to endorse absolutely everything that my friend and colleague Nicolas just said. I think he captured it really, really strongly.
So in terms of partnerships and in terms of looking into the future, if we from everything that both of you have said this morning, whether it's partnerships in across sector, whether it's in research, food security, and jobs for the youth, going forward, are these lines along those which you will continue? Because we look at the future in a lot of times and saying that collaboration is probably one of the best ways to go to achieve anything. Is this your thought as both countries for Kenya?
I mean, I'm sure that as far as Belgium is concerned, we want to start again and keep doing what we've been doing in Kenya. Let me mention that we are actually giving many state-to-state loans to Kenya in very important sectors, just like the energy, in the water sector, in the medical sector. These state-to-state loans are some sort of a gift because they involve a 35% gift, and they are small or medium-sized projects aiming at really equipping Kenya along the way of its economic development. So this is certainly something we want to keep doing. I think it's the message of most countries want to restart as soon as possible, knowing that the world will not be exactly as it used to be, but this is our dearest wish.
I mean, from an Irish perspective, I suppose I would just say, we've had such a long and deep relationship with Kenya, going back right to when the missionaries first arrived here, and many of them are still here, and they're remaining throughout COVID, I have to say. Some of them, even though they're in their 70s and 80s, continuing to work in informal settlements and so forth. But from there, now we have a very good business relationship with Kenya, actually. A lot of two-way trade and investment, a lot of visits both at political and at business level. And our firm wish, we're working together on Young Scientists Kenya.
Yeah.
Our really firm wishes to continue to build on those relationships, to really work on improving and increasing the two-way trade relationship, because I know from speaking to senior Kenyan people, that is, that's what people want. And actually we had our first trade visit from Ireland to Kenya. 40 companies came here last November, 40 Irish companies, led by our Minister for Business and Enterprise. And they signed, between here and South Africa, they signed 4.8 billion worth of deals, and actually the majority of them were in Kenya. So I think the future is very bright, actually. I mean, once we emerge from this very, really, really difficult crisis that's affecting the world over, I think we'll all be working very hard to increase and to build on our relationships at political and at business and people-to-people levels. And actually, you asked me earlier about Ireland's work on hunger and so forth, and one very important thing to mention is, many of your listeners, I'm sure, will have heard of the Sustainable Development Goals, a set of goals that guide how we can tackle the big development challenges between now and 2030.
Yes.
That whole process that involves essentially the whole world, all 190 plus countries at the UN, was actually co-chaired by Kenya and Ireland. So you're the gentleman who's an LPS at the MFA, and Sharia Kamau, and one of my colleagues, David Donoghue, who was the Perm Rep in New York at the time, managed to bring all of those countries along and forge this really important international consensus. So there's a really good example of where our two countries have led on a very important global agreement, and we certainly would like to see much more of that.
Maybe a final question for both of you yet again. If you were to give a scorecard of how you feel that Kenya, this country that you've chosen to partner with on so many different fronts, is doing when it comes to development and upholding the tenets of such collaboration, what would it be from your point of view?
A scorecard on do we have to give a score?
Well,
like for a pupil at school, no. I think that we know there are big needs in Kenya. Kenya is also, compared to other countries of Africa, many assets. Many assets. So I think the Kenyan government has been very eager to partner, is making the most of, I would say, all the possibilities that is offered.